had, until 2024, has an exemption not to send vote-by-mail ballots out to every voter, whereas in other vote center counties, they were required to send vote-by-mail ballots, and the Secretary of State is urging for November, and that it becomes a very costly endeavor, although one that may be worth it.
And is that, the postage cost?
It's the postage of sending out and the return postage.
The return postage cost and all of that, is a proportionate share of that going to be passed on to the cities who are on the
Yeah,
ballot?
yes, it would be by number of voters, and we have approximately 2.1 million voters. Of the 5.5 in the county, about 2.1 are in the city.
It seems to me that, especially since that was really, if that's going to happen, it's because of a Secretary of State request that is the result of mistakes being made by the county that we should not bear the cost of. That should be borne entirely by the county, in my view. But I don't know if there's a way that we can make that case, but I think we should. Especially if the only reason for that additional cost is because of the experience of the screwed up process, that the county conducted, so.
Well, again, legislatively, the only county in California that was exempted from this requirement was Los Angeles, and I think it was largely due to cost.
Mr. Kritz.
Yeah, I wonder if we can get information before we push to, or before the county requests the ability to go full absentee mail-in ballot. You said other counties did that in this primary?
Yes.
We should look and see what the result was, because I suspect that there are a lot of people that vote by mail because they vote early, and that's their habit, and there are a lot of people that vote on election day because that's their habit. And I suspect the number of people that want to vote early but don't want to vote by mail is not that many, so.
That's not the point of sending everybody a ballot. The point of sending everybody a ballot would be so that you had one in your hand, so that you would have the option of, once you arrived at a voting center, whether you had previously completed your ballot or not, you would have one in your hand and could just drop it off and therefore not have to wait.
So
But no
saving that
other,
amount of time by having the ballot already.
yes. No other county that was trying this out for the first time had a new voting system. For example, Santa Barbara County used the same voting system that they've been using. They just went to fewer voting sites and all countywide. So it was almost a perfect storm.
Okay, thank you. All right, that'll bring up City Attorney. We're good to go? You know what? Let's just go with it, and whoever we have.
Councilman, Deputy City Attorney Dan Whitley. I tried to contact our staff that handle
It's all right.
budget. Okay.
Don't worry. No, just have a seat, maybe, because it's just one, maybe two questions I have. One is, there's a transfer of 1.7 million from the UB to address over expenditures for expert witnesses, medical experts, and court reporting services, and so on. What's the explanation for that? Because we usually have a pretty good, I get that with major litigation in particular, it can fluctuate, but we usually have a pretty good sense of those costs, how they average out over the course of years. So was there something unique going on?
I can speak to that. For this particular year, I did ask the city attorney's office why we were seeing 1.7 transfer, and they reported that they typically don't know how much they're going to spend. It's largely driven by their active caseload. They're watching their costs, but in this particular case, They've seen just more activity, more need to go out to get expert advice, any medical expertise. So that's why we're requiring a transfer at this time.
So, okay, that's not a satisfying answer because, like every other department, city attorney has to operate within a budget. And the budget projections should be based on historical experiences. There are going to be sometimes fluctuations in, for example, outside counsel expenses when we have extraordinary litigation. But most of our litigation is not extraordinary. Most of it is routine. And so I think we need to do a little bit better job of being able to predict that. That shouldn't be so variant. In the scheme of the city attorney's overall large budget, that's not that much, but that answer is not that doesn't tell me anything. So it is what it is. The expenses have already been incurred, but I think I just want to make the point that choices sometimes have to be made in order to operate within a budget. So, and that's what we kind of expect will be done. So, okay. Now, I have a question on workers' comp costs too for HRB, on the HRB side. Some of that is city attorney, but probably not most. So, why don't you hang tight just in case, but let's go ahead and bring up, you have a seat, just don't leave, just in case there's a city attorney question. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dave Notmeyer from the Personnel Department.
Robert Roth, CAO.
So let me get to the right page here for a second, but just to tee it up, there was a significant unbudgeted expenditure for, I guess, unanticipated increases in workers' comp costs of $14 million. Now, again, there can be dramatic spikes if there's a few big cases or something, but for the most part, our workers' comp costs should be able to be averaged over time, and we should have a pretty good ability to budget that with some degree of precision. And with the risk management steps that we've been taking over the years and with better management of these cases, I'm hoping that's a number that's going to be trending downward, not upward. So how is it that we're $14 million over budget on workers' comp costs?
Councilmember, you are correct that normally, historically, our expenditures are pretty static. We use an actuary that has been extremely accurate in the past. This particular deficit this year is being driven by two items. One is a backlog of medical liens that are the result of an employee who treats under their health care plan and then later files a workers' compensation claim, and that treatment then is a lien against the workers' comp claim from the benefits plan. And unfortunately, there was a large number of these liens that were not being addressed timely, that we have resulted in basically catching up on the backlog. And what we are working on right now with our actuary is to try to, without a proper term, more normalize these number of liens going forward.
Why was there a backlog? Was this these weren't being followed up by the providers or by us?
A combination of both. I mean, there was a backlog of the providers coming forward with these liens. Some of the liens that were actually submitted were not being addressed timely. But we have caught up on this backlog. Between July and January, we've resolved over $15 million of these liens. There was actually a claim of over $21 million. So during the resolution, we were able to reduce that amount.
Okay, so if whatever number that is that of the 14 million that is the majority of that is due to these backlogged reimbursement claims?
Correct. The
Okay.
the other driver is related to our state assessment. This is a fee that we pay annually for the privilege of being self-insured. We were budgeted $11 million for our state assessment, but it is now projected to come in at $13.3 million. So it is $2.3 million over what was budgeted.
Okay, and that's based on some algorithm that's driven by statewide workers' comp costs, I assume?
Correct.
Okay, so if the providers whom we're paying for, that are on our, all of our employees have healthcare provided at our sole expense, so if the providers are getting reimbursed by workers' comp, by our workers' comp obligation, the providers are receiving a benefit of $12 million or so, $12 million, something like that. Does any of that reimbursement amount result in a reduction in our claims history with the providers that brings our payment obligation to them down?
In theory, absolutely.
In theory, but what about in actuality? In our negotiating with our providers, do we ensure that it does?
Well, I believe that it is factored into the utilization of the health plans.
Okay.
And so, yes, it should be reflected in the premiums that the city pays.
Okay. Who would be the best person to verify that? Somebody in the CAO's office, I assume, to verify that in fact that is happening? Would that?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
you're right, that it probably is, it should be. It's just one of those things that, can get overlooked if nobody is actually checking, so.
Correct, right. And the majority of these are for the Los Angeles Police Relief Association and the Los Angeles Fire Relief Association, which I believe they do their own negotiations for their premiums. So I really can't answer your question about who could verify that this is being accounted for, but in theory, it should reduce utilization under the healthcare plan, which should reduce your premium.
Councilmember, Robert Roth, CIO's office. Our office will look into it along with personnel and their benefits. section.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That explains that. All right, anything else, Mr. Kretz?
No, nothing else.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else then, anything else that you already read in the amendment? So, Mr. Kretz, if there's no objection, I'd ask that on my recommendation and that of Mr. Kretz, that we adopt the CAO report as amended.
No objections.
Okay, thank you very much. That will bring us then to our closed session items. So we'll go ahead and begin with item number 1, unless anybody has